Hi, folks. I'm Mike, and I hope you're well. Welcome to the show. This show, we're going to be answering some of the biggest questions in music production, the ones that have been eating away at your soul. I've got some, it's gone crazy already. I've got some friends with me here today, some very good friends, and they're going to help us answer those huge questions in music production. Now, this could go on a little while. I'll try and get to all of the questions that I've prepared, but if you do have some questions there in the live comments, go ahead and ask them. I'll try and squeeze some of those in as well. Now, as I say, I've got some good friends with me here today who I'll be introducing in a moment. They've all got their own YouTube channels, and I want you to check out the links in the description down below and take a look at their channels and make sure you go ahead and subscribe, because I think they're all really high quality channels, and they cover things that I don't cover on my channel as well, so definitely check them out. So I'm just going to say hi quickly to some of the people who are there in the chat already. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. We have I'm just picking them randomly here. There's no preferential treatment here. Just hi to Paul Mint there. Good day to have I got this right? Cian Brady. I always get names wrong. I'll even get the names of my guests wrong, probably. Jossie Music, you're here. Great to see you guys. Do make sure that another one's just come in there. Jeff, nice to see you. Do make sure that you ask some questions in the comments. Some of these guys will be taking a look at that, who I'm about to introduce. Now, I've got three guests with me here today, all actually good friends of mine. But the very first one that I'm going to introduce you to here is a guy called Marlon. He's from White Noise Studios. He's from the Netherlands, okay? The only person here who speaks two languages on a regular basis and runs a whole channel in his second language. Very impressive indeed. Hi, Marlon. How are you doing?
Hi, guys.
Nice to see you. I guess they're okay. They've got my pretty face on the screen for a start. Why wouldn't you be okay? But look, I was researching you a little bit here, Marlon.
Okay.
You first of all, folks, Marlon is probably the most qualified to answer all of the questions that you're going to have today. He runs a real studio. Okay, I don't shake your head, Marlon. He's a pretty smart guy. He knows lots and lots of stuff about lots and lots of things. I mean, not about facial grooming. He doesn't know about that, but anything to do with audio production, he's very, very hot on. And I was looking you up actually today, and I was noticing you come from a town called, am I pronouncing it right when I say Winterswijk?
Winterswijk, yeah.
Yeah. As I said, Winterswijk. Yeah. So in Winterswijk, I was noticing, I'm going to share this with you. I was noticing in the things to do in Winterswijk at the moment, this is on TripAdvisor. Thank you, TripAdvisor. There's no mention of White Noise Studio here. We've got an old lady looking at pictures. We've got a little house there that you can even ride on. Look at number 8 there. Ride on the bus. Surely they could have had you in there, Marlon. What's your explanation for this? This sort of oversight on.
It's 100% correct. It's my target demographics: old women in small houses and cars, driving cars. So that's good. Yeah.
So if you're an old lady, hop on the bus, go over to Marlon's studio there in Winterswijk, as it's commonly referred to by also the non-locals.
Also known as almost Germany.
Is that correct? So anyway, welcome to the show. As I say, folks, check out the link in the description to Marlon's channels. He particularly does awesome plugin reviews, really high energy stuff. He gets straight to the point, and he gives you some really good details on plugins and things. Very, very cool stuff indeed. Now, the next person that I'm going to introduce, thank you, Marlon, you'll be back later. The next person I'm going to introduce is a drummer, a songwriter, a vocalist. He's recently released a single, really fantastic. I've had his music on the show. His name is Ed Thorne. G'day, Ed. How are you doing?
Hello, Mike. I'm really good. Thanks for having me on board.
Well, good to see you here, Ed. In purple. You're in a purple patch.
Very purple,
as they say. Nice to see you there. Now, Ed, love the recent single that you brought out called Bright Lights.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can you tell me just quickly about that sort of, what's your journey been in music production, and how did you come up with your Ed Thorne YouTube channel?
That's a long story. Briefly, I've
keep it short.
Been a drummer since I was 11. I went to uni, then I was pushed into doing music production, produced a few songs at uni, kind of had the skills, ended up setting up a live sound business about 6 years ago, transferred all the skills, got way better at it, and then ended up coming back to studio stuff about 2 years ago and decided to produce an album of my own original content. And then I thought, I know what, I'll document the writing, recording, and production of the album on YouTube. Except no one wanted to know. No one really cared about a drummer they hadn't heard of trying to write songs. So then I pivoted the content, and now I've stumbled on a few ideas that work for me, and that's how the channel has developed. And I still write in tandem for my own sanity and for supporting content for me to talk about in the videos.
Awesome. I think that the music that I've heard on Spotify is a real testament to your production abilities, songwriting abilities. I really like it a lot. And I'm going to say this about your channel, that for me, when I watch your channel, you tailor a little bit more to the sort of higher end stuff. You know, I can see you sort of gravitating towards that in terms of gear, plugins, that sort of thing. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, it is more towards the higher end of the home studio production element, I think, partly because I think that's I find that stuff a little bit more interesting. I do have some reviews coming up with some more you know, kind of entry level stuff. But yeah, that keeps my interest, and that's what I'm enthusiastic about.
Now, before I introduce the next guest, I'm just going to have you here for a moment for your reaction to something. I just want to share with the viewers of my channel.
Oh no.
We often chat on Facebook Messenger, and recently you sent me a little voice message, right? Now, I'm going to have to bleep out an expletive here in this voice message. I just want to share this with my audience, right? Because I'll use the word bleep, okay? The audience can guess what the word originally was. So, quote from Ed Thorne. Your mannerism is very genteel and nice and compassionate on video, but in real life, you're a massive bleep.
Oh, Mike, I'm so getting you back.
So yeah, that gives you an insight to Ed Thorne behind the scenes, folks. And I'll get rid of him now. See you again soon. And lastly, a very good friend of mine, a guy I admire enormously. We've kind of been on a YouTube journey together. First got to know him when I only had 300 subscribers. He was on a massive 6,000 subscribers then, way back in the old days. He's been a bit of a mentor to me. I admire him very much because he's got a very down-to-earth approach with producing music. And if that's your thing, definitely check out the link in the description. And I'm going to introduce to you Pete Johns from Studio Live today. How are you going, Pete? It's a long time we haven't been on camera together.
It's been way too long, Mike, and this is the closest up that I've ever been on your show.
Yeah.
I'm a little worried now because after seeing your treatment of Marlon and Ed, I'm just a little bit worried about what you've got up your sleeve, because anyone who knows Mike knows that he's always got a surprise or two ready to go. But no, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you and the gentleman here this evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, Pete, I should have mentioned Pete is in Adelaide here in Australia with me. Marlon is in Holland, the Netherlands, and Ed is in London, in some different parts of the world, which is why me and Pete are drinking alcohol and the other two guys are not. Nothing to do with the time of day, just because we're Australian. So that's what we do. Anyway, so Pete, it's interesting you should bring that up. You're a guy, as I say, has kind of shaped the things that I do on the channel. And one of the things you've shaped as a result of one of our early live shows together was the way I pronounce reverb.
Don't you mean reverb, Mike?
Well, it's funny you should raise that, Pete, because ever since you kind of picked it out live on air with me, right, I've corrected my pronunciation, but I've got a good reason, Pete, to go back to my old way. I was watching a video today with Warren Hewitt, who would argue with Warren, and Hugh Padgham. Now, do you know who Hugh Padgham is?
I don't. I'm going to show my ignorance like a
Okay,
scar.
he's a producer. No, you're not ignorant. Don't ever say that about yourself. Don't ever say that about yourself. Other people may, but don't. Hugh produced, we did like Phil Collins, The Police. I think he might have done Kate Bush, you know, a whole bunch of people you may or may not have heard of. And anyway, he raised the question of that particular effect, and he pronounced it reverb. Just saying. I'm just saying. You know, Pete Johns, you should send him an email, buddy. That's all I'm saying.
I think so. Well, there you go. Potatoes, as Robar says here in the chat here. Yeah, you know what? Given that my kind of area of not expertise, I don't even like to say that, but my area of passion is GarageBand, and I'm in an eternal battle. We'll have to check with Ed and Marlon, GarageBand or GarageBand. GarageBand. Then, pronunciation in the world of audio is a hot topic.
You notice I didn't mention that in your intro. I didn't. You're the first person to mention. I didn't want to mention it in case I was corrected by someone. And
it's a GarageBand. I'd leave immediately. That's how it would work.
Right, let's get on with the bloody show. I swore already. Okay, let's bring these guys back in. Oh, there goes Ed. Okay, so let's go to the questions now. As I say, do not forget to ask some questions or some follow-up questions, folks, in the chat there, to the ones I'm going to ask here. There is, as I say, they're going to be directed at some of you in particular, some of my guests in particular, and they're going to be the first ones to answer. And if we have time, then the other two bearded folks can also reply. I won't be replying. I don't have a beard. I know. How unmasculine of me. So the first one's going to be directed at Marlon from White Noise Studio.
Oh, dear.
Marlon. The eternal question. The eternal question. I think you'll have an opinion on this. And I think you may have the answer on the top of your head, so to speak. So the question is, Marlon, can you mix on headphones?
My answer is it depends. It's always the same answer.
Yeah,
no, it really does. I used to have AKG headphones and even tried Beats headphones. Don't burn me for it. But from the moment I had these ones, I can say yes, you can mix on headphones. But
what is that you've got on your head there?
Olo Audio.
I don't know them. They look beautiful.
They're from Slovenia. Wait.
Wow, they look gorgeous looking. So they're open backed.
They're open backed headphones, and they are pretty linear, extremely linear. So you don't want to use these when you want a nice hi-fi experience. But they really are a secondary pair of monitors, and I can make the mix decisions on these ones. So that's actually pretty nice. But I've noticed with other brands, like say the AKG and some cheaper ones. When you make
there goes your sponsorship deal with AKG. Just by the way, but anyway,
it doesn't matter. When you mix on those and you listen your mixes back on other systems, other headphones, it completely falls apart and you have to start over. So as a reference, it's fine, but as a complete mix replacements, it's more difficult. These ones I can do mixes, but I still have to reference once in a while. But I can make a mix on these ones and they will translate, so that's good.
How do you sort of objectively judge that, whether you've made a good mix using those as opposed to monitors or other headphones?
You can listen to that in regards of reverb. That's one thing, because on headphones you normally tend to use a lot more reverb than on speakers. You can notice it also in your padding. It's actually easier to hear things in your stereo with headphones than on speakers usually, because they are so isolated with left. Did I make a bonk over here?
You made a bonk, yeah.
Because this doesn't have any cross bleed, right? So you don't have any normal. You don't listen on headphones like you would listen to speakers or actually anyone talking or real life. It's a bit skewed.
Okay, thanks for your answer there. I'm going to head over to the Ed Thorne there. He may have some input there. What have you got on your head there, Ed?
I have the Sennheiser HD 300s.
Oh yeah,
that way. 300 Pros. I actually mixed. You mentioned Bright Lights earlier. I mixed that entire song on headphones because we're in lockdown in the UK.
That's why.
And my flatmate was getting a bit annoyed with me blaring speakers all day, talking to myself on camera to make videos all day. So I had to move to headphones for pretty much everything. And combined with SonarWorks, which is a great piece of software for calibrating your room sound and calibrating your speakers to the sound of your room. And they have headphone profiles as well to flatten out your headphones, so you get a flat frequency response. Combined, that it's incredible, and it is very accurate. And in terms of panning, as Marlon said, and delay panning and control, and really identifying separation and spatial awareness, headphones are brilliant. But as Marlon said, I would always go back and reference on a couple of speakers. Now, Sonarworks have just done an update. Your viewers may find this interesting, to their software, which basically gives you profiles for. They've measured the EQ profiles of hundreds of devices, from laptop speakers, mobile phones, car stereos, Auratone mix cubes, Yamaha NS10s. So you can reference your mix on all these different devices. So basically representing what your end user would be listening to your music on, which I think is mind blowing. Shameless plug, I put a video out about it yesterday, and it's a great addition to the software. So yeah, headphones.
Awesome. Definitely. I'll watch that. Cool. Mr. Johns over there. You may have a bit of a special perspective on this, really, I reckon, with your sort of target.
Oh, people often say I'm a bit special, but no, I do, and that is that. Yeah, I guess that a lot of what I focus on is using what you have, and I think that. Yeah, I know a lot of people who make a lot of really good music on headphones, and I think a lot of the time, yeah, we do get a little bit caught up in the gear that we're using and what we're actually mixing on and how you're listening to it. But yeah, I agree with what the other guys have said, that it's horses for courses, and it totally depends on the type of music you're mixing and what your end result is and what your end goal is too. So not a lot of people talk about what you're actually trying to do with your music. And I think as listening patterns change and as the type of music people are producing is changing, we're finding a changing environment in home recording as a whole. So yeah, as much as I like listening on a nice pair of monitor speakers, I think, grabbing your headphones, especially in the sort of environments that we're in, because I mean, yeah, hands up who's recording in their home, in a home studio. Yeah, you can't always blast your speakers, and you've got children and flatmates and other people around you. So I think having a decent pair of headphones is a good start. And I think, starting with whatever you got, creating with whatever you got, and then leveling up. So, I like what Marlon and Ed were saying there, that, their journeys are, you start out and you get your gear, and then you work out what works for you. And then, if you want to upgrade and you want to do other things in the future, then if that works for you, then more power to you.
Cool. So I'll just put in my 2 cents worth. I think it's important, first of all, just to understand the differences between headphones and monitor speakers in terms of what you're getting. So probably the most obvious thing is the room. You're not hearing the room. So that, for example, the sound coming out of your right monitor speaker is not just going in your right ear when you're listening to monitors, okay? It's bouncing around the room. So first of all, you're getting reflection. So you're not hearing, it's not isolated to one ear or the other, whereas you can actually do that in headphones. And also, the room affects the actual sound, in terms of, is the timbre the right word? The timbre? I don't know. I don't know English. It sounds good, doesn't it? I'll keep that in. Sounds fancy. But yeah, the actual tone of the sound could change with the room. So I think it's about being also aware of the tools you're using and potentially their sort of limitations or their advantages. I mean, arguably, I tend to think these days, I don't know if anyone's done a survey, but I'm thinking that a lot of people are listening to our music on headphones rather than speakers these days. So there could be a case, I guess, to say that's where most, exactly. Yeah, most people listening to music through that tiny little speaker at the bottom there.
That would be a good question for the folks here live, Mike, to ask them, where do you listen to most of your music? Who's listening on speakers? Absolutely. I don't remember the last time I listened to music for pleasure on speakers. It's all headphones or earbuds these days.
Let us know in the chat there where you are listening to most music. I've got a quick question that's come up here from Jossie Music. Thanks, Jossie. Are the PreSonus Eris 3.5s enough to start mixing? I don't know if you guys have had any experience with these at all. Have any of you had any experience with PreSonus monitors? Pete's nodding his head there.
Yeah, I just bought a pair for this very studio because I kept getting recommended them, especially because the mobile creating environment, you need something mobile and portable and easy to use. And yeah, I just installed them, and the KRK Rockets that I had were the old G4s, G3 4-inch ones, and these are as good, if not better. And these are $99 for a pair. and the old KRKs are 200, 250 each. So yeah, they do punch well above their weight in my experience, especially if you're in a small studio like this and you're just using mainly headphones and you just want some monitor speakers for referencing. Then yeah, they do a good job in my experience so far. I've had them like 3 weeks, so yeah, watch this space because but yeah, they again, if you're in the high end, you got comparing them to like some 8-inch Mackies, and you like plug these in. Of course, there's going to be a difference, but yeah, as far as reference speakers goes, if you're starting out, I think they're gold.
Cool. Yeah, I think Sound on Sound said they were by far the best value for money speakers of all time.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Awesome, good stuff. Haven't used them, but everyone knows I'm a big Presonus fan. Presonus, you should be sending me some. Just saying. Anyway, moving on. Stu Cash says he listens headphones and the car. Yep, sometimes at the same time for me, by the way. 99% AirPods Pro. We'll get on to Apple things a bit later in one of the other questions. But yeah, cool. And speakers mostly. Very scientific research we've done here with a sample of 3 or 4. Appears as though headphones are winning at the moment, as I stated in my theory I presented. So moving on to the next question. Thanks, guys, for that one. This one's going to be directed first off to the Ed Thorne that we have in the bottom right corner there.
You're not going to let me. You're not going to let me forget that one, are you?
The Ed Thorne. Just in all of Ed's social media, he is the Ed Thorne. He is the Ed Thorne. He's the only Ed Thorne that I know, at least. Anyway, he's the only Ed Thorne that you should know. Check his link in the description down below. Right, moving on. This is something I think you're going to have a good opinion on this, Ed. It may not be exactly what people expect, but you are a drummer primarily. As an instrumentalist, you're a drummer. I've heard you being very apologetic about your vocals. I actually think that your vocals are quite good, but I'll pigeonhole you as a drummer. Right, and the question for you is, in this world of home studios, I'll put it up on the screen, virtual drums or real drums? You might be a bit biased, but just give us your opinion on virtual drums versus real drums, as from a drummer's perspective.
Well, from a drummer's perspective, I am a bit of a purist. I just don't believe. I mean, you can humanize stuff in plugins now to create a bit of a swing and a bit of an inconsistent. It's crazy that softwares and plugins enable you to create inconsistencies in a digital, in theory, perfect realm to sound more human. I mean, as a drummer, I've spent 25 years playing. I've spent decades practicing. So I'm a bit of a purist in terms of, certainly on my stuff, I can't imagine ever programming anything except maybe some percussion. But I think the just the feel you get from a human is always going to be there, even if you quantize the life out of stuff in Pro Tools, for example. And the beat detective quantization in Pro Tools is unbelievable. I've actually just done it on a couple of songs, and it's unbelievable. And you do still get the human feel in the beats in between, as long as you don't quantize every single 16th note, in which case, then yes, you may as well program. But this is very stylistic. I come from this from a rock pop point of view. If you're into trap or hip hop, then programming stuff is the way forward, because people were punching in samples in the 80s. So stylistically and sonically, using 808s, stuff like that, it's stylistically, that's what's kind of expected. And the reality of recording drums is very difficult. I have to go to another studio to record drums. I don't have the setup in my flat at the moment, which is a shame. But not just from a recording point of view, you need so many more mic preamp inputs, you need bigger interfaces, more microphones. The cost just goes through the roof very quickly. So in comparison to programming stuff and using some of the amazing bits of software out there at the moment, it kind of, it's hard to justify one. And also, mixing and producing drums and editing drums is difficult. It's a lot of work to get right. So there are so many advantages into, punching stuff in on a keyboard and quantizing it, and then humanizing it to unquantize it a little bit to make it sound realistic, and adding in some swing. You get equal amounts of control with both, but live drums are much more difficult to control, because everything bleeds into each other. You get kick and snare in every single microphone and cymbals in every microphone, and you can do your best to optimize this in the studio or minimize these the bleed, but the reality is it's tricky. But I love it. I love the challenge.
Good on you. I was having a fight with someone the other day in a forum. I wasn't using my real name because I don't fight under my real name. But
I didn't. They were saying, "I'm going to keep that." I think I can spot your tells on social media. I'm going to look out for it.
So this person was saying, real drums versus fake drums or virtual drums, and I was sort of pointing out to them one thing, that it's a virtual drum kit. It's not virtual drums. In other words, they are samples. Another word for samples is recordings. They're real drums. Yeah. But then as a collection of drums, as a drum kit, that's virtual. And I sort of feel about virtual instruments in general, it's not so much the sound of them. There's no doubt that, even the old favorites like Addictive Drums have fantastic sounding drums. But then you've got to be able to play them well. You've got to be able to, if you want it to sound like a real drummer, you've got to play them the way a real drummer is. And, the other day, of course, I was mixing one of your songs in one of my videos, and I was just sort of taking note of that the way a real drummer plays is very different to the way I do it with my fingers on a piano keyboard or on a drum pad. There's subtleties in there.
Yeah, and I think like any instrumentalist falls into little nuances, like drummerisms, for example, where a drummer knows physically on a kit what is possible and what isn't. A producer who isn't a drummer and hasn't figured out that certain things do and don't work with coordination, and you've only got 4 limbs to do stuff with, a producer can go in without the limitation, the practical limitation of the instrument, and create whatever they want.
Yeah.
So you hear these trap beats with these kind of ridiculously fast hi-hats. It's like, some, I could do that, but some drummers could do that, but not everyone has the technique to pull off really clean things on the hi-hats, for example. So it's also a creative tool, which is the beauty of it.
It's interesting that you mentioned that again, when I was listening to this interview with Hugh, I was always pronounce his name Padgham today. He was talking about that the famous reverb, or the gated reverb that was used, in the 80s, which came, I think, before In the Air Tonight. Reverb, I know. It came about before In the Air Tonight, but then became huge during that time. And one of the things about that was, if you were going to record the drums and have that effect, it didn't work very well with cymbals at all. The cymbals just messed the whole thing. So they recorded all the cymbals separately.
Yeah, I've heard of that. There is a very famous drummer I won't mention because I can't corroborate this, but yeah, I've heard of people recording kick and snare and toms and then miming with one hand, because a lot of drummers rely on their lead hand for timing and coordination. So miming with one hand, air drumming with one hand, playing kick, snare and toms, tracking, and then doing the cymbals over the top to avoid the bleed of the cymbals, which can, the cymbals cause havoc with gates. You can get a really clean kick and snare sound with a gate, and then you hit a crash cymbal hard, and all of a sudden you get this, as the gate opens up because it's triggered the snare mic, for example. So doing that way, I get it from a production point of view, but from a vibe point of view, and as a drummer, no way, no one's ever getting me to do that, because this is how I play. My whole coordination and dynamics are based on how the whole kit sounds in a room, and that's the sign of a great drummer from a good drummer, is how adaptable they are to their own inter-kit dynamics and how aware of the recording environment they're in. One thing I love about recording is that I see writing, producing, performing, mixing and mastering is, I love having just a global perspective of all the processes, and I think it makes each one of them better.
Cool. Great answer from Ed there. I would expect nothing less from him. I'll move straight over to Mr. Johns over there in Adelaide. Mr. Johns, you didn't expect that, did you? It was a bit of a surprise.
That was a bit of a surprise. I was caught.
Is there anyone out there in the garage band community Because just a quick note, I'll say this before you tell anyone else. Don't think that if you're recording songs on mobile devices that you're just using the microphone on that device. You can plug your audio interface, mega audio interfaces into a mobile device, no problem. Is there anyone out that you're aware of who are recording live drums onto their mobile devices?
Yeah, it's probably rarer, only because there's not a lot of people with like big mixing desks that are plugging them into their iPhones and iPads. It is possible because there's lots of desks, lots of boards that actually are class compliant, meaning you can plug them into your iPhone or your iPad and record, 12 channel, 16 channel. But a lot of people these days have got 6 or 8 channel interfaces, and they're plugging in a bunch of mics, and they're setting up either in GarageBand or Cubasis or Audio Pro. There's a heap of options in there, and they're recording live drums. It's like I say, it's not as common as it would be on a desktop or on a PC or a Mac, but it's definitely happening. Like, there's definitely people in the GarageBand world that are doing real drums, and I thought it's interesting. One of the comments there was, a lot of people that program virtual drums think that drummers have extra arms and legs, and that they can actually do a bunch of things at once. Yeah, there you go.
Now, I used to fall into that category. I probably still do, because I've done a lot of videos on virtual guitars, and my mission there, I play guitar, and I probably wouldn't actually use a virtual guitar in my music because I can pick up a guitar and play it. But my mission with those videos is to try and teach keyboard players how guitars work, what you can and what you can't do. But then again, I'm reminded of the fact that when the Beatles said we're not going to play live anymore, that it opened up this whole new world of saying, hey, in the studio, we can do whatever we like. We don't have to be able to do it in real life. So there's another perspective there to say the studio can be a place where you can forget the fact that you've only got 2 arms and 2 legs. And if you want 4 cymbals to play all at the same time, and that sounds good, you can do it. There you go, Ed Thorne. Anyway, but...
Totally. Yeah. And I think you've said this before. Sorry, Ed. You've said this before that, virtual instruments, we had a debate about this, that people get all caught up on virtual instruments. So it's like, unless you're banging 2 bits of wood together, an electric guitar is by definition a virtual instrument, because you are using amplification to make a string go through an amplifier. So anything that's not natural or a real instrument, you could argue, is anything that's not completely percussive.
But it's how those strings resonate together. It's how the neck and the body resonate, isn't it? That creates the whole sound. And it's how a piano resonates together. Individual notes isolated. I guess if the sample's recorded with the other strings resonating as well, it works. But yeah, I don't know. There's purists about this, and there's the virtual realm. But I mean, it's all changing, and it's all becoming acceptable, isn't it?
What say you, Marlon, over there in Holland? What say you are a drummer, and by the way, just as a little interjection, Marlon plays the drums, and he also plays bass really well. Check out his latest video, which I think you released it yesterday. I was watching it today, about a bass guitar effects unit kind of a thing.
Yeah, the one-off stop to get your best bass guitar sound ever.
That was it. Yeah, it was good. But it's the first time I've heard you play bass guitar, and it was really impressive, actually. Nice playing on there. But what say you anyway about the virtual drum issue?
I like both. Actually, I record live drummers a lot, and I work with samples a lot as well, and I think they work together really well. If I have a free jazz drummer, then samples are usually not an option, because it's impossible to enhance the free jazz drummer with samples, because it's so complicated and intricate and a lot mostly. But if you have a rock drummer, for instance, adding samples can actually really enhance the groove in a good way. I think I did it as well in this record. I think you did some snares, samples, and stuff.
Shh, don't tell anyone. I was going to mention it earlier, Marlon, when he was talking about he never uses samples. When he was saying that, I was thinking.
I didn't say that. I said I never program on my music. I don't program.
Yes, there was a little enhancement going on in a couple of places, tastefully done. Very, very commonly done, actually.
But I must say, samples have been a lifesaver for me on many occasions when I get tracks to be mixed, which were recorded in a rehearsal room with a Zoom recorder. And we want thick, big tom-toms. And Okay. So first, I always try to do it with EQ first, and if that doesn't work, I isolate the toms and try to trigger them with samples, and it actually works really well most of the times.
Cool. Any specific software you use for your triggers?
No, I just use Cubase and hit point detection. It works.
Oh, okay. Cool.
It works awesomely.
Cool.
It's
Marlon, I have a question for you, and I've heard Simon Phillips being asked this very same question because Simon Phillips in the States runs a recording studio. Yeah. The question is, have you ever been tempted to replace any of the drum parts that you've had sent to you with your own playing?
No, because I also think that's not
dishonest.
Really... yeah, dishonest, but
it's fine. I just assumed you would have.
No. It's more work to replace them than just get in and edit.
Awesome. I think we'll move on to the next question, but the final thing I just want to pop in here about this is a user comment. Speaking of 2 arms and 2 legs, some bands have used 2 drummers, so that multiplies the sound. So there you go, Ed Thorne. How about that then, eh?
Twice as expensive, and you have to program the information in more times.
Oh, can you imagine the sound checks?
It reminds me. Check. Have you guys ever listened to the first track of Blood, Sex, Sugar, Magic by Red Hot Chili Peppers? The first track. Yeah. The very first track of the album. 2
Power
drums.
of Equality.
2 drums. It's played twice. It's one drum kit on the left and one drum kit on the right. One is one is very close sounding and one is very reverby.
Cool. Do you think I can try that? Do you think I can try that with Addictive Drums? Do you think it's going to
work? Addictive Chad Smith.
I did not know that. Good fact.
Yeah, that's good.
No, it's actually but when you can hear it because you hear flamming all the time. It's not sync. It's got a little flam. So
I'm gonna listen to that because drum sound wise, that album is incredible.
It's so good.
Incredible.
It's big sound, very big sound, and not recorded.
Check one out. Now moving on. Got time restraints here, Marlon.
Time restraints.
Yes, we do. Now, talking about drummers, time restraints. So, moving on. This question's directed at Pete here, primarily. And the reason, I'll just give it a little bit of background because most of the time that I've noticed recently that Pete's turned into a bit of an arsehole, really. I mean, I was looking for another word, and yeah, wanker's a good word. That's still allowed. The reason I say that is because. Well, most of the time I've known him, he was a PC user, and then the M1 chip came out, and he's gone to the dark side. I've noticed a couple of social media posts which suggest that he's no. Oh God, I'm surrounded by bearded men with M1s. Okay, so the question is not what I had there. This is a question for you, Mr. Johns. Mac or PC for music production? What say you now that you've had a whole 1 month's experience on the subject?
Can I go off and say iPad? Because that's what I've used. No, if I wasn't able to use a mobile device, which is obviously my preference, as it is for all of us, we all know that, I would use a Mac. Main reason is that I've tried PC, and look, it's my personal experience. And I say, before I give any advice, I say 2 things: in my experience and in my opinion. I think there are too many people out there that make definitive statements about their experience and their opinion and expect other people to just toe the line. That is BS. I'm being polite with the swearing. But yeah, in my experience. So prior to this, I tried Reaper. I played around with Cakewalk, BandLab, whatever the one you use is that's nice and fancy and free now. And they just never gelled with me. And it wasn't until I grabbed an iPhone and an iPad and started playing around with GarageBand and Cubasis and these sort of apps that it really just gelled. Like, it was just so simple to get up and running. And now that I've moved over to the Mac, I realize why all the people that I've been giving grief to for 30 years about their Apple products and their Macs, just saying that PC is by far superior, we're actually onto something, because the barrier to entry is so much lower, and I think that's what helps people. You can start out with GarageBand, you just press a button, you say, I want to record a guitar. You press the guitar button and you record a guitar, and then you do your thing. But it has the whole other end of the spectrum where you can go right up to using Logic Pro and actually having a full-featured DAW where you can do everything you need to do. That is a very weird thing, because if you asked me this question exactly 6 months ago, I would have given you a very different answer, because until the M1 came along, I didn't rate Macs and I didn't want to own one because it was too hard. But they've actually found a way to get a Mac into the hands of 30-year PC Windows advocates like me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's a fair enough answer. I'll withhold my opinion for a moment. In fairness, I've not used a Mac with an M1 on it, so it wouldn't be fair. But I'll go over also, because he held the box up just a moment ago, to Mr. Thorne here. So that box, I know that you've struggled a lot recently with issues with your computers. I've seen you crying like a little girl in some of our messages. So
yeah,
how long ago did you get this?
It arrived literally the other day, but I'm going to give myself about 2 days to set it up and install all the software. So I've got that primarily at the moment for video editing and screencasting, because I have a top spec 2015 MacBook Pro, which, as long as you keep cool, and this is what I didn't realize, it was overheating and bottlenecking as it slows, minimizes the processing, so it doesn't heat up more, which is a big problem with this 2015 model I was unaware of when I bought it refurbished to replace my other one, which was having the same problem, which was a heating issue. So the MacBook Pros can overheat. I've since got a tray, cooling tray, and it works brilliantly. I had it out on the weekend with a live.
Oh, it stopped working now. Stop working now,
no.
Ed. I'm sorry. Just to, he had it out working. So we'll move quickly. I don't know what's going to. Ed may have to leave and come back in. We just leave him there frozen.
The timing was immaculate,
wasn't it? Perfect. Yeah, good. Ed, I don't know if Ed can still see us or not. Ed, you may want to leave the stream and come back again. We'll go over to Marlon. That was just hilarious. Love it.
I actually realized one thing. Mac or PC, it's all about workflow. What you like, right? Yep. I worked on both, but my primary computer is a PC. But one thing I always dislike when I go to Mac is I used to play games a lot, so I have a WASD type of doing. I use Control. On PC, you can use Control a lot. Control, click, keyboard commands. On Mac, you have to use the Command key, and that one is located
next to the spacebar.
And that is, from an economical sense, it's terrible.
Yes, I agree with you there. I use both, so I have to go between the two. It's mind-boggling.
I really dislike the Command key over there. So maybe we can change all the key commands on Mac to use Control. That will be logical, but by default, I think that's unergonomic. It's not really nice to use. So
I'm going to go back to Ed because I want to give him his time, because he was interrupted by his Mac failing on him at the moment. At that moment. So
as if
Ed,
on cue, and I was just saying how my MacBook Pro is having problems. It literally turned itself off and said there's a problem with something. Which I'm actually gonna put this out there. No, I'm not gonna say that, but I was gonna blame a recently installed piece of software. Best I don't do that.
No, go on, go for it. What have you recently installed? Just as a by the way.
I don't know, but yeah, the irony of explaining how this computer had problems and it closes down live on stream. My apologies, everyone. And I've forgotten what I was saying. Other than basically the problem I've had with my MacBook Pro is it's only got 2 GPU graphics cores, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's just developed a problem where if I'm screencasting, which is capturing the screen to record the software that I'm working in and the audio and my voiceovers, it can't handle it and spazzes out a little bit. So I've actually ordered the M1 just to try and avoid any of these issues. Now, unfortunately, you can only get 16 gigabytes in it at the moment. I was hoping I could, future-proof myself and get like 128 or something. But I got so fed up with having issues with this country. I've just with this laptop, I've just bitten the bullet and bought that one. And then
the country.
That's a whole nother live stream. And as and when a better M1 Mac comes out, or when things are a bit more stable, and Universal Audio have caught up with all of their plugins and interface interactions with it, I'll probably
So I think that's one of the other sort of issues. I mean, it's a new thing, and I definitely have heard lots and lots of good things about M1. Been tempted myself for sure, but I don't buy things. People just send me things. But
YouTube,
product
of your own success.
But I do use a MacBook Pro as well. I've got to say personally, I could be sort of a bit unpopular with some people, but it's just my opinion that there's all this thing about how user-friendly Macs are all the time. And I'm going to say the same for iOS as well, as opposed to Android. And I think we're just sort of wired differently, some of us, because when Susie asked me to fix something on her phone, it's an iOS device, I'm like, where did they put the settings? I usually get to the settings from the app. Why is the settings all hidden away there? And it confuses me. And I find that Macs in general, for me, they work wonderfully. The hardware's gorgeous, all that sort of stuff. But when things go wrong and when it gets a bit geeky, I just find them much more cumbersome personally than PCs. It may be ignorance on my part, but I don't necessarily find that they're easier to use. I just think it depends on what kind of person you're. Now, I will say that that one advantage of them, or one difference with me, and I think the same may be true of Marlon down below. Let's see if I can get the directions right. Marlon down there, is that I do build my own PCs. I have done for many, many years. I'm a bit geeky like that. So I think when you build your own stuff, then that's a different thing with PCs. If you really like to tweak and tailor and, have this specific memory and what have you. Lots of people not interested in doing that, wouldn't have the confidence to do it, wouldn't care for doing it, wouldn't have the time for doing it. I get it. That's fine. I just drive my car. I don't take it apart. So,
yeah, I think a couple of things on that, Mike. I think to Ed's point, like that, because I thought that too. I actually literally got the 8GB Mac Mini because I just wanted to see what an off the shelf. And someone mentioned, Mac equals dollars, and it used to. But the thing is, I paid just over $1,000, like all up, for my Mac Mini M1, and it crushes my old like i5 with 16 gig of RAM. And it's got 8 gig of RAM, because it's all different now. That's the thing. Intel want you to think that it still matters about clock speed, and it still matters about graphics, and it still matters about memory. It actually just matters about energy efficiency and processing power and what you can actually get done. And I think Marlon might have been mentioned, or someone mentioned workflow before, and it is so much more just about the workflow side of it. The other point is, though, Mike, I agree with you. The user-friendly side, Mac people and iOS people get very defensive about the fact of how user-friendly it is. It is not. My channel only exists because iOS is not user-friendly. If Apple had all the manuals and all the user guides for how to use all their stuff, I wouldn't actually have a job, because I only have my job because it's not, and I have to explain the simple stuff that people should be able to do with a tap of a button that actually takes 14 buttons. So
I think we're all secretly agreeing with you there for some of the software that we and the hardware that we use as well. Thank goodness for YouTubers. Let's just take a moment to thank the world for YouTubers and how great they are, and they're here to help everybody.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yes, lovely.
Like, comment, subscribe.
And
hit the bell.
All right, good answers there. I did like that one. Mac versus PC. If you're watching the rerun of this, do go ahead and make lots of comments down below about Mac versus PC. I'll go ahead and delete them right away. But if you want to make those comments, absolutely fine. I won't be reading them. But anyway, moving on to the next question. Now, I'm not going to go to the next question. I'm going to go to something a little bit more topical for me, guys. And I'm a little bit confused about this. Over the last few months, I have done 2 or 3 occasions reviewed software which is being supplied on a subscription basis rather than buying it. Okay, and I've noticed, not so much on my videos, but when I look at other people's videos, which I do, a bit of research before you do a video, there's a lot of hate about subscription. And here's my quandary. I was thinking about this today. Very deep and meaningful. I was thinking, I don't hear the same gripes when people talk about Spotify or when people talk about Netflix, right? I'm not talking about musicians with Spotify. I'm talking about listeners. Everyone thinks it's cool that you can subscribe to Spotify and get whatever you want whenever you want. Everyone thinks it's great that you can just subscribe to Netflix and not have to buy movies or what have you. What's going on here? Clear it up for me. Going straight over, first of all, to Marlon.
I think both have their place, but one thing I have as an objection to subscription is when you have a subscription, you need to have it for as long as you have projects running. If your subscription ends and you are in the middle of a project, you have a problem. If you own a plugin, you don't have that problem at all. That said, you should never end your subscription while working on a project.
Pay your bills. Yep.
But that's one thing. On the other hand, with subscription, with for instance Plugin Alliance, you pay your monthly fee, and you get added new plugins all the time for free. You don't pay anything more and just get more and more and more. So that is actually a really good thing. Why people dislike subscriptions in comparison to paid ones, I think it has to do because with musicians being very conservative.
That's a very interesting perspective of musicians. Yeah,
old gear is always better than new gear. So,
all right,
things in the past are always better than new stuff. So I don't mind. I think both work. So whatever.
Okay, interesting. I'll head over to Mr. Thorne there. What's your perspective on this? Do you have any subscriptions, or do people just send you stuff?
Well, yeah. Now I kind of refuse to pay for plugins. Although I did have to pay for FabFilter, they were having none of it when I asked them for NFR licenses. I have to admit, I don't have huge opinions on this. I do prefer the idea of owning something outright. I think if you add up a couple of years worth of subscriptions, you could have. The reality is you're going to come back to the same handful of plugins in every project anyway. At least I do. I've got maybe 10. That I use.
Right, that's very true. That's very true.
4 different brands, 10 or 12 that I use in every mix. So by the time you've paid for a couple of years of subscriptions, you could own those. Now, there's one company that fall in the middle of this here, where you, and obviously I won't mention it, but you purchase plugins for a very competitive price, but you never actually own them because you're actually only buying a license that does run out, and then you get a little email that says, "Oh, you need to update this license, or you need to update to this version, otherwise it's not going to work after a certain amount of time." Interesting business model, very successful.
Same is true. Just incidentally, as a weird sidetrack, same is true with iTunes. When you used to buy songs on iTunes, there was a case, I don't know why I've remembered this. I've got all sorts of rubbish in my head. I think it was Bruce Willis, I seem to remember, who put his iPod in his will. He wanted to leave all the music he'd bought to his daughter. And they were like, no, you can't do that. You've only got that on license. You don't actually, you've bought the song, but you don't own it. You can't keep it. Can't give it to someone else. So there you go. I've noticed your facial expression here was like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah. I mean, okay.
I know. It was a sidetrack. He's got nothing to add there. We'll move away. We'll switch him off and we'll go. We've had Marlon already. Over to Pete. Pete.
I'm just going to try a different facial expression every time. So obviously the Apple universe is renowned for subscriptions, and there's a lot of subscription models within iOS in general. And I actually think I've got a bit of a different take on this, and I come and go with the different things, because I think subscriptions are great. That if you got something that costs $300 and instead you can pay $5 a month for it for as long as you need it, that can actually be good from a budgetary, because who's got $300 to throw down? I think the issue that most folks have with plugins or with software is it doesn't get updated that often. You're not paying for something new. There's not the new hotness or the new shininess. If you compare it to Netflix or Spotify or Amazon Prime, you're getting new content on the daily, weekly, monthly, yeah? So if you pay your subscription fee in March, in April, there's going to be a whole bunch of new shows and movies and music and whatever to listen to. It's always changing. The problem is, if I pay for Adobe and I've got my Premiere Pro and my Photoshop and I'm paying my $50 a month, they're updating that once a year, once every 2 years. There's nothing new coming there. So I think subscription models are great for content where it's constantly evolving and updating and growing and you're getting new stuff. I don't think it's that great for something like Pro Tools, where people are paying a monthly fee to use the same old Pro Tools they've been using for like 3 years. And that's, I don't know, that's sort of the way.
I do wonder, as I was pondering this issue of why do I see so much hostility in the comments with subscriptions, because there's various pros and cons either way, but I do wonder if Pro Tools didn't sort of just give the whole thing a bad name because they're kind of the most prominent and first to go, hey, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'll just bring in Ed here because I think he uses Pro Tools. I'm not sure if Marlon does or not, but Ed, can you buy Pro Tools, or is only a subscription now?
As far as I know, the top 2 packages are subscription only. I've just done a 90-day trial. I mean, it's a phenomenal bit of software. I kind of agree with John there. From a profit point of view, from the company point of view, it makes sense to go down the subscription route, because I thought about this with Apple. I paid £200 for Logic 7 years ago now, and Apple haven't made any more money out of me on their DAW. So from a business point of view, it makes sense that Pro Tools would go subscription. But from a user point of view, I agree with what John said. Unless they're offering regular updates like, the television channels do, you're basically paying multiple times for the same thing that isn't getting updated very often. So Pro Tools won't have gained any new fans doing that, and I was concerned for a while that Logic may follow Apple may follow suit and do the same thing with Logic, but I just don't think they will, because they can get so many people on their channel, on their platform, for a £200, I don't know what the equivalent in Australia, $300 fee is. That I think they'll stick with it. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, because I don't want to be paying.
Don't you think that there may be an argument for doing it for the home recording person, doing it on a project basis? In other words, just as another example, this is not plug-in based, this is hardware based, but there's a place here where you can rent musical gear. Now you can get, I think U87s are about $100 a month to rent. And I've thought to myself, you know what? You don't need to own a U87. If you were going to record an EP this year, it's going to take you 6 months. You may just be better off to rent it for 4 or 5 months to do your vocal tracks rather than do the big spend. You may not use it. Just saying, from a cash flow point of view, it may be a good.
I think that's a good argument, since I run a studio. I own a lot of stuff, but COVID hit.
Yeah.
So a lot of sessions were canceled. People weren't able to come, stuff like that. So I have a lot of gear sitting around doing nothing at the moment. So it's a bit. I get why you want to rent instead of want to buy. I get it now.
And I guess what I'm alluding to is there's a case, if you're just thinking, look, I'm not really going to be a producer, I just want to produce my EP, I'm going to do that this year, then there may be an argument there to say, hey, just subscribe for a few months to some of those plugins. Remember to freeze your tracks, guys, and that sort of thing, so that you've got the tracks with the effects applied to them and that sort of thing. Somebody was just mentioning that.
Do your demo productions with the stuff you have, and do the final recordings with the rented stuff. It will be an excellent solution.
I've got to say, just from this comment here, and yes, if you remaster in 15 years, but the subscription software is not available anymore, you're in trouble. I've got to say, I have that problem with just plugins that I bought years ago, which, where are they now? I'm 2 or 3 versions ahead. I've opened up a project from 5 years ago. Oh my God, where have I put, so, can happen either way there. So folks, how are we doing for time here? Just having a look, it's right over there. Oh, we're only an hour in.
I'll need a wee break, Mike, if you're going to go over too much.
I'm hanging in here until I grow a beard, guys. Good answers so far. If you've got any specific questions that you want the panel to ask, folks, then definitely ask in the comments there. Guys, my guess, if you can point me towards some of those, because it's a little difficult for me to keep track of them here. Nice to see a few favourites in here. I'm just going to say hello to Jade there. She's had her opinion, but good day, Jade, a friend of the channel and of Pete's channel. And a friend, in actual fact. Check out Jade Star's YouTube channel. And I saw way back here, I can't probably scroll back far enough, but I saw Alexi in the comments there way back somewhere there. G'day, Alexi. Nice to see you here, friends of all of us here. Check out his channel as well. Alexi, can you remind me? What's the name of your channel? How do you pronounce his surname? It's Russian.
Alexei Soloviev Music.
Thank you, Ed. Saved me there. Moving on to another question. I'm not sure who I'm going to aim this one at. Let's have a look. Okay, no, this one's going to go to the Ed Thorne. I think he I've seen a lot of product reviews on Ed's channel, some very good product reviews about audio interfaces, one of his favorite topics. So I'm going to go over to you, Ed, to ask you this question. I'll put up on the screen now. Should you record at 96 kilohertz or higher?
Very good question, with some very polarizing opinions. I did a video on this about a year ago, and during my research found out that it's there's many opinions, and it's actually quite a complicated subject when you get into sample rates and why certain things are used. The reality is, yes, obviously the higher the sample rate, the higher the bit rate, the better. However, sample rate only really refers to the frequency range that you can capture in an audio source. So, for example, 96 kilohertz. There, you basically it's 2 samples per kilohertz per hertz of frequency. So, 96 kilohertz translates to 40. What you can potentially capture a range up to 48 kilohertz frequency. Now, the reality is, humans can hear.
Can't hear it.
Half of that at most. I mean, it's well known that we can hear up to 20 kilohertz. There's some research to suggest that above 20 hertz triggers alpha brainwaves, which gives us that sense of feeling above 20, but that goes up to 24, 25 kilohertz, apparently. So, I mean, the problems, yes, in theory, you could downsample, but I don't see the point in that. At 96, your files are obviously twice as big, and it's also twice the work for your plugins to process. I personally record at 48, keeps things simple. That's what I send to my mastering engineer when I'm not mastering stuff myself, and it works fine. CD quality is 44.1 kilohertz, which translates to a frequency range of 2250 hertz that you can capture. So, that's plenty. CD quality is plenty, and that's what the streaming platforms are operating at, 16 or 24-bit, depending on the platform, and 44.1 kilohertz. So to record at 196, just because a device can do it, just gives you far too much data, and you're going to have huge file size, which is going to affect your CPU and computer speed. So my personal suggestion would be go at 96 if you feel like it. But I mean, broadcasting's different. Broadcasting, you'd want to go for 96 because then they go down to 48 when they go live. But I would suggest 48. Keeps things simple, keeps things easy, and I'd be very surprised.
Interesting. I tend to agree on some of it. I used to record in 96 years ago, in fact, but at the end, I didn't know that I had any benefit, and I was getting a lot bigger files. I think my current interface goes up to 192. Never tried it never even switched it over. And I did know, I think it may have been on your channel, you were noting with Audient, for example, they're just not playing that game anymore. I think they're maxing at 96. I don't know.
And I'm reviewing the ID Mark IV. Sorry, ID14 Mark II this week, and that is still at 96. I was surprised they didn't upscale that to 192. So I asked them about it, and they just said, we don't see the need. 96 is, by the time it's downsampled for your DAW or plugins to handle, or by the time it's downsampled to go to mastering at 44 or 48, to then go to streaming at 44 or 48, it just doesn't matter. And the new ID14 sounds amazing. You will not miss that extra 96 kilohertz.
Cool. They're sending me one at the moment, just as a by the way to my audience. So I think they're sending me 2 actually, the 1.4 and the smaller one as well. Looking forward to trying them out. I'm going to go over to Marlon. He may disagree with you. I hope he does. I'd like to see a grown man cry. What do you reckon, Marlon?
You should record in the format it will be at the end. So if your end product is 48, record in 48. If your end product is 41, 44.1, recorded 44.1. 96, not really needed. In regards to plugins, most plugins offer oversampling options these days. So this is just because the ripple effect of the plugins usually, if you're running at bass sample rates, can be audible, and it actually can sound pleasing. That's another discussion. That's another discussion. But if you don't want that, you have oversampling options, which of course will cost more CPU usage. But then you will be way above the hearing range of humans.
So is there an advantage? Do you think, though, to any advantage at all to recording at, say, 96, even though your target's going to be 48 or 44?
At this moment, I would say no, but maybe for future releases. If you plan for maybe what will happen in the future, then you are safe. Then you have a 96 kilohertz recording, and you are not limited by 48 kilohertz. But to be completely honest, 48, even versus a 300 kilobit MP3, the difference is so inaudible. You can hear it a little bit, but it's
and that's coming from a European, folks. So they're normally, a little bit.
It's nice. You can nicely test it on, for instance, if you have Deezer. I think Spotify will go that route too. Do you know Deezer?
Yep.
The streaming platform, they offer a lossless. It's a FLAC streaming option, and if you toggle between 320 and FLAC, you can hear a slight difference in mostly transients. That it's just a tad less with 320 kilobits, but in FLAC it sounds.
And I was just thinking, as you were saying that, you can hear a slight difference, and also take into account your kids are screaming in the background, or you've got your engine noise of your car, or how many of us just sit down in a pristine environment and listen to our music anymore?
Most of it comes down to when you have a very elitist listening environment. Perfect acoustics, perfect speakers, perfect headphones. Then you can hear a difference. And not their usage, no.
I think a myth to dispel where there might be some confusion between sample rates is, I get the impression some people think that if I have 48 kilohertz, that's 2 samples per hertz of frequency. If I go to 96, that's 8 samples. Therefore, the resolution is better. That's not how it works. So if it did, amazing, and I'm sure there'll be a day when digital technology.
You're saying that the frequency range increases rather than the sample rate,
rather than the actual resolution. I mean, it gets complicated, and that's where bit depth kind of comes into play with dynamic range. I mean, I've put a video out on this, very basically simplifying what is quite a complicated scientific process. And I'll bring Pete in for it by experts who know way more than I do.
Of course you will. I'll bring Pete in here in a moment, but I think a good way of thinking about this for folks listening or watching in the comments there is that if it may be easier for you to think about this in terms of photography or digital photography. So you've got sort of two factors. You've got the actual number of pixels in the photo, and then you've got the range of colors which have been captured within that photo as well.
That's a great analogy.
And it's just a handier way to sort of think about it. You've got those two factors. Now, Pete Johns, what just quickly, I've wondered about this. When you're recording on mobile devices, what choices do you get in terms of sample rates?
So it depends on the software. I use GarageBand a lot, as we've already talked about, and that is locked into 44.1 24-bit.
Right,
so you
go.
are recording at 44.1 24-bit, and that's what your mixes, and that's what your masters, and that's what everything's going to be. And to be honest, I've tried the others. I must admit, I bought a Steinberg interface, and it had on the thing 192 kilohertz. And I'm like, I got to try this. So I fire up Reaper, and I record at 192 kilohertz. And my computer just started crying. It just said, no, I don't want this anymore. Please stop right now. My hard drive was whirring, and it was just like smoke coming out the back. So I decided that wasn't something that I wanted to do anymore. But yeah, I think it all comes down to the end listener. And I think a lot of the answers we've given here today would probably have been different 10 or 20 years ago when people were listening on I would say better listening environments. That might be
Right,
controversial to say, but I think people are listening
Probably
on
right.
crappier speakers and crappier headphones today than they were 10 years or 20 years ago in general, because a lot of people, as Marlon said a couple of times, they grab their phone and they're listening out of the little teeny speakers there. So you're trying to like pump up some bass. They ain't getting no bass out of here. And 96 kilohertz, is that going to make a difference when you're listening through your phone? Unless you're using some, a stereo amplifier, like a headphone amp in here and some very nice cans, probably not. So I don't know. It's my view on this is that I don't think that at this point in time, I think Marlon's point is valid, that maybe, and I think Ed said the same thing, that maybe in 10 years' time it'll flip back around. There'll be the counterculture of people that want things to be high fidelity, and I know Deezer have already got their HD. iTunes are gearing up to try and have their HD master, which I think have to be 96 kilohertz if I'm not mistaken, at least. So yeah, I think it's coming. But for the average home studio musician now, save your space, save your hassle, save your processing power, and go 44 or 48.
Here's an interesting perspective I've heard, and I've just seen it in the comments here. And I'm not an expert on this, so I think you guys may know more about this. But there is this idea that 96K creates harmonics in some frequencies. Okay, now of course, because the idea being that it's created those harmonics, now they're in the recording. So even when you downsample, those harmonics will still be there in the recording. What say you, Marlon?
Harmonics are always usually if you've got even harmonics, there will be a double of your bass frequency. So if you have a 50 hertz bass note, the first harmonic will be at 100 hertz, the second one 50, and so on and so on and so on. So this has nothing to do with sample rate. It happens in music. It happens with distortion, saturation, stuff like that, and not with sample rate.
Okay, interesting. I mean, we may have dispelled a myth there. I have heard this before. As I said, I'm not an expert.
No,
I'll take Marlon's.
If you simply take a sub bass enhancer, it will add harmonics. It's completely frequency independent. It happens at every sample rate you use. So no, it's not making any difference.
Marlon, could you just explain to everyone who may not know what oversampling is in a plugin? Because there's always this little thing at the bottom, and I just ignore it. I don't really know what it is.
It means your CPU will go nuts.
Yeah. If you have a 48 sample rate in your project and you use 2 times oversampling, it will go double the sample rate for that plugin. So to go to 96 kilohertz.
And what's the benefit of that?
The ripple effect, if you can hear it. So there's a trade-off. If you have a very low sample rate, that there's a slight aliasing effect. Aliasing, that's the one, happening which can be audible. That usually happens in the higher frequencies. If you double the frequency, that aliasing will be put in a frequency range you cannot hear. That's the whole thing.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I'm just going to butt in here with a little bit of an opinion, and it's just to talk a little bit what Marlon said there. If you will notice it, or if you can hear it, this idea of these things may exist. Can you hear it? And I would say if you would even notice it. An experience I've had a lot recently, or during the course of the channel growing, is a lot of people sending me their music. Usually I'll get emails and things. Hey, would you have a listen to this? And I've noticed. Time and time again, that what I listen to, me and Susie often listen to these songs as they come, is the song. That's the prime thing that my brain just goes, song, what's happening with the lyric, what's happening with the melody, maybe the mix a little bit, because that's usually what they're emailing and say, hey, can you check this mix out? But my focus goes to the song time and time and time again. And I just think that sometimes as musicians, we can lack confidence in what we do. So then we try to look for technical solutions to overcome what we view as our shortfalls. Yeah, this will be a great EP if only I really focus on compression this time. No, focus on your songwriting every single time. Just do that first. You can ruin it with bad mixing for sure, but you know the sayings, polishing turds and all that. So that's where I kind of go with this. To be honest with you guys, here I am. I'm running a YouTube channel about music production. I probably can't hear the difference between 96 and 48, to be quite honest with you. Just That's the truth. That's my big confession.
And you're old, so you cannot hear above 5 kilohertz.
This is true. I can't hear above. It's very, very true.
And you've got shocking taste in music, so you've got the trifecta of just horrible stuff there.
You've just insulted Ed Thorne there. I'm a big fan of Ed Thorne.
I was listening to Ed's music before the show. I love it.
Thanks, Pete.
Just a quick thank you to, I hope I'm saying it right, Robarth, for the $10 donation there in the chat.
€10, even better.
€10, even, yeah, very, very generous.
It's like $50 Australian dollars.
Yeah. Are we invoicing for our $2.50? Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, let's. I put a little time. We're going about 10 minutes more, folks, on this, and I'm just seeing some of the questions down there. I may get back to some of them. I've got one more question from my list. I'll bring it up on the banners here. And I know that Mr. Thorne is going to probably have a bit of an opinion on this, as well as Mr. Marlon and me. And
I'm Northern
Mr.
Mike. I have an opinion on everything.
So here we go. I'll leave you all up for this one. Plugins or hardware? It's an oldie but a goodie. Starting off with Mr. Thorne.
Okay, absolutely, both, all the way. I think they both have a use. I've only really delved into the hardware world in the last year. I'm glad I did. It was a very interesting learning curve. It's a very different workflow. Hardware acts differently to plugins. Plugins are reasonably easy to get your head around, I think, how the gain structures work and the processes, and it's all very visual. My personal thoughts on it at the moment is hardware in. If you can record through a nice preamp, a couple of nice compressors, obviously don't overdo it because you can't undo it. I avoid EQ because I think that's very mix dependent. I certainly wouldn't track with reverb, but a nice preamp, bit of gentle compression. I actually go through 2 to go in, especially on vocals and acoustic guitars. This sounds great. Mix everything in the box, and then if you can, hardware to go out. So if that's where a couple of EQs and a nice hardware compression, and I really want to get the Rupert Neve Orbit summing desk. I think that'd be amazing, except it's £2,000.
Oh, they always are. The things you want are always expensive. Just now, I actually agree with you there, and I do the same, by the way. On the way in, I record with compression, a limiter sometimes, not much else. But can you explain to the audience why that would be? Because I know a lot of people think, well, why can't I just add that on as a plugin afterwards? Why do I need to have that during the process of recording?
Yeah, good question. For me, and I've done comparison videos comparing analog and universal audio hardware emulation plugins, and for me, every single time there is a depth to the sound. There's a 3D element to it. There's a fullness and a warmth that I get from tracking particularly vocals and acoustic guitar through a preamp versus putting on a digital emulation. I don't. Plugins are very good, don't get me wrong, but if you really listen, in my opinion, there is a difference, and I just prefer how analog sound. And it is that nth degree that the difference, the benefit is tiny, but if you multiply that through multiple bits of hardware versus multiple plugins over multiple tracks, by the time you get to a finished mix, your A and B is actually not going to be that big. It's going to be like that big, in my opinion.
Okay, well, but I just want to interject before we go over to Pete on this. That I just want to sort of say this, especially for people just starting out who are watching this and are in the chat. I actually agree with pretty much all of what Ed's said there. However, do not believe for a moment that before you record your next EP that you have to buy hardware before you do that. Again, going back to my point earlier, song, every song and performance every time. But I'm trying to remind people as well that we sort of say, hey, the song's important, your performance is important. And I've been trying to say to people recently, the only thing we've got to remember is, you're a good singer and you're a good songwriter. There's a lot of them out there. You're competing against them. So then we come to this point where there's 2 songs, great singers, great songwriters on both. You can get a little bit of an edge with better quality of audio or better sonic quality. So there is a consideration there. But anyway, I'll move over to, first of all, to Mr. Johns over here, because he doesn't use outboard hardware. Again, educate me. But it could be done, couldn't it? It could be done again with mobile devices. With a
absolutely, yeah. Like so the mobile world is the interface. Yeah, mobile world's no different to PC or Mac. Yeah, again, you're recording ones and zeros into a device, and this is probably the biggest misconception people get, that whether it's a Mac or a PC or an iPhone or an iPad, you're hooking up something, you're recording audio at a sample rate and a bit depth, and that is exactly the same. So, yeah, if I wanted to, I don't, because I'm a lazy man. And I think that's probably the key point here, is that I'm a very lazy guy, and I remember the 4-track days. Mike, you're old enough, Ed probably not.
Yes.
You're old enough to remember the 4-track days where we had to use outboard gear. You wanted reverb on your 4-track, you grabbed your rack-mounted reverb unit, you dialed in your settings, and then you put it out from there, and then you looped it back in through your effects send back into your 4-track, and then you recorded it, and then you had to lay your second track, and then you had to bounce it all down, and by the time you had 16 tracks, it sounded like an absolute dog's breakfast. But it was fun, and we learned a lot. And I think, I don't know if this is a thing, because there's a lot of people that love their analog gear that started out in studios with analog gear. There's people in between, I think, that had to deal with analog gear and then just love in the box so much because we don't have to plug stuff in anymore. And then there's people that are enjoying the retro chic. I'm not saying this is you, Ed, but there's a lot of people that are like, hey, I've done all the in-the-box stuff. I want to play with some knobs. I want to turn some dials.
That was me, yeah.
Yeah, just because it's cool. Because there is a certain thing. Mike, you've said this a lot, and Ed, you probably agree. When you're making music, we said at the very start, it's got to be fun. You've got to be passionate. You've got to be enjoying it. And there is something about turning a knob on a piece of kit as opposed to just pushing a slider with your mouse or your touch screen that actually feels like you're creating. And that's the thing. People probably think this is surprising that I say that because I don't use any of it, but I totally understand and dig why people love their analog gear. I get it. I just am far, far too lazy to plug anything in anymore.
Cool. And I think that's, you know, just to sing Pete's praises a little bit, going right back to the beginning, because, you know, I was a fan of Pete's channel before I even started YouTube, and I do love the idea of just getting stuff done. Pete's the kind of guy, he's probably going to record pretty much a whole song in a day. He may have it mastered and released through DistroKid late in the day. He's made the artwork. Where did you go for your artwork, Pete? Just a little plug there. Canva, probably.
Canva.
Yeah, he probably goes there. Yep. And he's got the whole thing. And, you know, there's something wonderfully, wonderfully spontaneous about that, and just very, very cool. That was not possible before. We did not have the technology to do that. And probably myself and Ed are a little bit more like, we're much more insecure. So we go, we've got to have that. We've got to have that 3 dB less at 5K for it to be right, or else we can't release it. And so
yeah, and I think you said it right before, where it's about the song. Like if you're in $1 million studio and you've got a crap song, you can record it with the most pristine outboard gear in the world, and it's still a crap song. If you've got an amazing song and you record it on the voice recorder on your phone, it's still an amazing song. And that's the big difference. People think that they can polish a turd and they can do whatever else you say by having all the gear in the world to make it sound great. It'll sound great, but it'll sound like a great turd instead of a crappy turd that it might sound if you don't have all the gear. So yeah, it's all about writing and recording a good song at the source, and then everything you do from there should improve it, but you can't fix it. Fix it in the mix is a myth, and I think we all know that. I don't think anyone's arguing on the side of, yeah, just make it do whatever and then fix everything in post.
Marlon, what do you reckon? Hardware, software?
Hardware versus software. I again, both, or whatever, or either. Doesn't matter.
We want answers, though, Marlon. We want answers here.
I do have a little rant, because when you see a big name mixer, I only work in the box. Yeah, true. But what happened before you actually mixed the That's always left out. So, but that said, I use both hardware and software. Hardware is a pain in the butt. Hey, that's a nice one. If you want to recall settings. So when I use hardware, it's always so early in the chain. I did test the Tegeler Cram RC a while back. That one is a remote controlled hardware unit, which is excellent for recalling when you use that unit on the master bus. So that's something I like. Using hardware on the way in, not always. I use a lot of external effects. That's just my way. I just capture the audio as clean as possible, and then I'll add my analog sound somewhere early in the chain with external effects. I print it, and then I use plugins to finalize my mixes. This is my workflow. That said, I worked with plugins before I actually used hardware, so you can get excellent results with plugins as well. So it all works.
Cool. Thank you for clearing that up for us. It's now as clear as mud. It's great. We've we've alluded to turds quite a lot during this conversation. Thanks, Pete Johns.
I think Marlon raises a good point there. You know, you hear these records that like Chris Lord Alge's mixed, and I mean, he's maybe not a good example, but you hear these records that producers who mix in the box use, but they've gone through, a rack of Neves, a rack of 1076, 1176 LA2A compressors. So the source quality, they're going through vintage microphones in acoustically perfectly treated rooms. So the source quality is far better than you're going to get out of a £50 interface that's been recorded in a toilet. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. But then again, as well, coming back to it, it's more often than not those great producers. It's not just the gear that they're recording with, it's the talent they're recording as well. The songwriting capabilities, the performance, not all of it's great, mind you, Chris Lord Alge, got to say.
But I would raise a point though, that the best and the most important and the only equipment that matters is the equipment you have to record that song right now. Get the song out. And I've played hundreds and thousands of weddings, and I can guarantee no bride and groom have chosen the first song based on whether it was recorded at 48 or 96 or through a Neve preamp or into a Behringer interface. They do it because the song means something to people.
Absolutely, every time. And that is the essence of music. It's why we all loved music right from the beginning. Probably for all of us when we were kids, there was a particular song or something we heard, we just thought, that's cool. It evoked emotions in us. We weren't thinking, oh, I wonder what microphone they're using on that. Marlon may have been thinking that, but the rest of us.
I have my best vocal recordings with death metal musicians, singers, were recorded with an SM58.
Yeah, absolutely, and I've heard that a lot about the SM58. Particularly for people with powerful voices with really
gritty voices. It's excellent.
Bono, I think, used for some of their most famous recordings, used the SM58. As a weird little fact, gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. Some of my favorite people in the world on screen with me. I can now die happy. I hope it's not too soon. I'd love to have you all back again, folks. I hope you've got something. Thank you so much for joining us. I didn't really take many of your questions, but I really do appreciate you tuning in for this. And if you're watching on the replay, do make sure you like, subscribe, and leave some comments. If you would like to ask some specific questions, I'm sure these gentlemen will come back to the comments and ask any that are directed at them. Just use it @ before their name so that they know about that. But yeah, again, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I do hope you come back again, and I hope that everyone goes and subscribes to your channel right away. Even if you don't like beards, go there. You can ignore the beards. You'll get a wealth of information from these guys, all from a different perspective, and there's lots of different perspectives on these questions. These questions that we've asked today will be asked again and again and again in Facebook groups, so on and so forth. There is no clear definitive answer to them. You've got to come to your own conclusion, but we have given you some perspectives, I hope, in this show. Thank you so much for joining us. Ed Thorne, any last words?
No, thank you for having us. Keep creating, stay positive, be kind to one another, and I'll see you on the next one.
See you in the next one. Goodbye, Egg Thorne. Pete Johns. I said Egg Thorne. Did anyone notice that? We'll let it go by. It must have been when I was looking at Pete Johns' head. I thought egg, and I was like, Egg Thorne. Pete Johns, anything else that you would like to add before you head off to bed? Because it's quite late there.
Apparently I have a head like an egg. No, please keep creating. My mantra is create, record, release. So keep doing that. And me and Ed have a very similar thing that we say at the end, which is be kind to yourself. Because remember, you got to fit the oxygen mask to yourself before you help others, including children. And then be kind to other folks and keep creating. Rock on, Mike. Rock on, everyone.
Very, very cool. Marlon, how can you beat that? That was...
I won't be that. I am not going to be that. I'm just going to say, keep on rocking and check out everyone's channel. See ya.
Do that. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Last wave to everyone, and I'll end the show. Thanks so much to everyone who watched, and we'll see you next time.